Hey, this is Miranda, and you're listening to or watching Their Lived Experiences.
Hey, Mom.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm very, very excited to have this conversation with you. Like, I'm beside myself excited to have this conversation. How are you feeling about it, about sharing all this stuff?
I feel good. I do. I feel good about it. I thought I had shared these stories with you before.
Some you did, but some I don't remember you sharing.
Okay.
And when we were chatting the other day, you shared new information with me where I was like, oh, let me capture this on video so we can just get into it. So you grew up pre-civil rights movement, US, and I wanted to ask you about the racial climate in South Carolina. I wanted to ask you what segregation was like for you.
It was a way of life. It's what I have always known. I knew that there was a separation between white and black, and you just didn't cross that line.
But how did you know that? Like, you say that you know that, but how were you taught those messages?
Well, it's just subtle things that has happened, like when my grandfather was killed, and you see white and colored on doors in doctor's office and on restroom doors, and wherever you go, it was just there. It was just a way of life.
Well,
and if you crossed the line, something would happen. You could be riding in your car, all of a sudden a bullet fly through the window. So you just knew. You just knew.
That's horrible. That sounds terrible.
It is, very much.
Okay. So you said even at the doctor's office. So what did it look like in the doctor's office? Segregation, like what did that look like?
Okay. He had two entrances, white and colored, and you knew which one to go in. At one point, I did go peep in the white side to see if it was any different, but it wasn't. It was just two rooms, one on one side and one on the other.
And what would happen if you were to go stand or sit in the white side?
You would never be called. You just sit there. The nurse may ask you to leave.
And how did that make you feel, knowing that you had to be separated?
Like I said, it was something you grew up with. So you knew that was just the treatment. You knew. It didn't begin to bother me until I was a teenager.
And why did it bother you when you were a teenager?
Well, your eyes become open, and you realize that you wanted to be treated equal, that you were no less than. And then protests started. You wanted to join the movement somehow. You may not be as bold as some, but you wanted to do something.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So before we dive into the protests, let's talk about what it was like when you were a little girl, how store owners treated you, or white people might have treated you in the street.
Okay. I was from a small town. So basically, we knew at least 75% of the white people that lived in the town. We knew them. You grew up with them. There was this one particular general store that my parents frequent. This man, he knew me all my life. I was probably about 16. I had gone in by myself, spoke to him, got whatever I went in for. I don't remember what it was. Went to the counter, gave him the money, held my hand out for him to put the change in, and he put the change on the counter. Because see, white people didn't touch black people. You know, that was the way. So he put the change.
In case like they catch the blackness?
I don't know. Maybe our blackness would rub off. I don't know. But he put the change on the counter. So I stared at him, and I picked my change up, and I said, I'm never coming back in the store again. And I left. He didn't say anything. A few minutes later, my dad went in the store, not knowing what had happened. And the store owner said, tell her I'm so sorry. I didn't mean anything. I'm sorry. And so when my dad got home, I told him what happened. And he didn't say anything to me because my dad is, one of the ones that helped my eyes to be open.
Open your eyes how?
Well, my dad stopped going to protest meetings, and he would carry me with him.
I never knew that. I didn't know Granddaddy went to protest meetings.
Well, I mean, it wasn't we weren't bold with it, and we weren't really out there on the front lines, but yes, he would go to protest meetings.
There's another story that you've told me that I would love for you to share. The story about Maxwell. Sad story.
Oh yeah. There was another general store, Maxwell Grocers. He also had a farm. There was a Black family that lived on the farm. The man had been working for him for years. I don't know why he decided to go in Maxwell's store that afternoon, but he went in and evidently words were exchanged, and he turned around and he was leaving. And as he was walking through the door to leave, Maxwell shot him in the back.
Mm.
And he just fell on the steps, just died.
And no consequences.
Oh, no. There was never any consequences on whites killing Blacks in South Carolina.
You seem so calm about it. Like, I find that even more disturbing than the stories, that this is so normalized to you that you're like, yeah, they just killed Black people, but no consequences.
I had been going through this since I was 3 years old. And so you wear a mask, and you just learn this is what happens. You get killed, nothing happens. There's nothing you can do about it. Another thing is, when I was probably around 9, I had an aunt that had been in New York. She lived in New York for probably 5 years. So she became accustomed to their way of life. New York City was more advanced than the South. I mean, they're more tolerant. My aunt came home. We'd gone to this little store and she purchased something. She wanted to purchase it. She got to the counter. The lady was charging her a higher price. And she told her, no, the price on the back said, for example, $1.99. So why are you charging me $2.99? And the lady got really smart with her. My aunt cursed her out. I was so afraid, because Black people just didn't do that. You did something like that, you would get killed. So here I am standing in the store and my aunt is cursing her out, and she grabs me by the hand and said, come on, let's go. That father made me realize you have to stay in your place, because there was a place for Black people. There's a place for white people. You do not cross the line.
That sounds so bad. Like, I can't relate to that in any way. Like, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s and 90s. So
yeah,
I can't even envision it other than a thought exercise, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't something happen to your Uncle Duck?
Yes, this was back in the 1940s. Uncle Duck was my grandmother's brother. He was in the field picking cotton with a dozen other people all morning. This white man who he was working for went home and saw bare footprints in his front yard. So he called this lady out, and she was the housekeeper. He called her and said, who do you think these footprints belong to? And she said, Duck Birch.
How would she know whose bare footprints in the sand those were?
Have no idea. No idea. But she was a Black maid. So this man came to the field, called him, and said, you were at my house. And he said, no, I was not at your house. I've been in this field working all morning with a dozen people as witnesses. And he said, well, if you want to live, you better run. My uncle turned around to run. That was his only option. He turned around to run, and this man shot him in the back, and he just fell on the cotton sheet.
That's terrible. And again, no consequences.
No consequences, except the only consequences he had was there were family working in that field, so they all left. He had no one to work. And the Black maid who said it was his footprints, they shunned her. She was no longer welcome.
I get that. I can understand why.
This happened in the 40s, and it probably in the 60s is when they start talking to her again. And only because she married into the family, a distant relative.
It's crazy.
And they still didn't really forgive her. They still remembered it because she was responsible for his death.
But okay, she's kind of responsible, but she might have been in a weird position. If you have a dude that's going to shoot somebody based on a footprint in the sand, like, what pressure was she under?
I agree.
That's horrible. Let's try something lighter. There's a story that I love, and it's a story of Victoria Dalee. Can you tell me that story?
Okay. I think I was still in school, and I've heard of this lady, and she was bigger than life to us because she was really into protest. She held meetings. She told Black people where they should shop, where they shouldn't shop. In particular, there was a grocery store. The majority of the customers were Black, but they would not hire any Black people.
Why? Why? If the majority of their customers were Black, like, I don't understand where in segregation this particular rule falls. Is it just we are not going to give employment to Black people, or we just don't want Black people touching our stuff?
Nothing was equal. And Black people you didn't have jobs. The only job you had was a maid. If you went to college, you became a school teacher. That was it.
What do you mean? If you went to college, you could only be a school teacher? Like there were no
No,
other
no, 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 no.
professions?
I'm just saying that is who we look up to, school teachers, because they had gone to college and basically that was it. It's not like we had architects or lawyers or doctors or anything like that where we lived. Now they were in the largest cities, but that's an hour away. So you didn't have those local people that you could actually look up to, but school teachers. So anyway, Victoria decided to boycott the store because they would not hire Black people. She told all the Black folk, do not go to that store. And so they wouldn't go, but we had gotten telephones. So they would call up, order their groceries, and then the store would deliver it to their house. Well, Victoria had people that would follow them. And if they stopped into a Black person's house, the people would see them and they would tell the guy, no, it's not mine, go, go. It's not mine, go, it's not mine.
So she was protesting out in front of the shop going like, give us jobs. And then if you were a Black person who crossed the picket line by ordering food, she was like, I'm gonna shun you too.
Yeah.
Was it effective? Was it effective? Did it work?
Yes. Eventually they did start hiring, a few Blacks, one or two. Yeah. But that was the flavor. Even in the 70s, when we lived in Illinois, I lived down the street from this little general store. They did not hire Black people. And they were in the Black community, and the majority of their people were Black. And this was in Illinois.
In the North, that is meant to be more progressive. But so they wanted Black dollars, but they didn't want to pay Black wages.
Yes.
Wait a minute. You say Illinois, that means when I was a little girl.
Yes, during the time you were born. Yes. It was right there, the house on 17th Street where you were born. Right down the street, there was this little store on the corner, and they did not hire any Blacks. They may hire someone at night to come sweep the floor, but that's it. No cashiers.
It's the same today. Like we love to think that all these issues have kind of progressed and we've overcome some things, but it's still the same in some shops. They won't hire front of house Black people. Black people work in the back. Black people clean up the place, but they can't be on your tills for some reason.
Right.
And I don't understand the logic of it. Is it that it's the optics on it? Oh, well, we're mostly white and, it's better. Like, I don't understand.
Even you remember when I worked at the bank?
Yes.
When I was first at the bank, I was one of the first Black tellers. And the Black people would come in and they would see me working. And then when I would see them in the street, in the grocery store, stuff, oh, that's the Black teller. Hey, how you doing? They were so proud.
Because of the representation. So you had a positive impact on the community because at least you were able to demonstrate we can get these jobs and do well in them.
Yeah. Yes.
Didn't you manage that bank at some point?
Yes, I was an acting branch manager for a while until they hired another white person to come in. And then I had to train her. Wait,
so you were good enough to run the bank, but you weren't good enough to officially have that position?
Yeah, right. When I inquired about it to the head of HR, he said, well, you have to have a degree, a bachelor's degree in order to get the job. Well, that didn't sit well with me. I mean, by this time, I'm fully aware. So I went to the president.
Of the bank? You went to the president of the bank?
Yes. I went to him and I spoke with him. And he knew that Mr. Williamson, he knew that I was running the bank. And I told him, I said, this position is available. And I was told that I could not get it because I don't have a degree. And he said, I'm the president and I don't have a degree.
What? Oh, how did you feel? How did you feel in that moment?
I felt vindicated. I really did. I felt vindicated when he shared that with me. And soon after that, I was offered another position at another bank, but it was farther away from home, and I didn't want to be that far away from my children. So I didn't go. And then after that, your father wanted to open a business. So I ended up quitting and opening up the business for your dad.
As an aside, let's just tell the people, my mom ran those businesses well. 2 of them, and she ran them well.
That's the end of part 1. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Then you'll be notified when the next video is released. In part 2, my mother and I further discuss the segregation of violence that shaped her youth.